All right, boys, here we are. This is the Race Communiqué. As always, I've got to welcome my two guests, my two mates, Tom Southam, Director of EF Easy Post. Southam, good to have you on board, bud.
Hey, mate. Nice to be back again. How are you?
I'm doing well, mate. I'm doing well. Feeling a bit fresher, I think, than you two, coming off a massive period of racing. And of course, we've got to intro our other guest, Luke Durbridge. Durbo, welcome to the pod, of course, the Communiqué, fresh off the Belgian classics. Durbs, welcome.
Morning to you, Mitch, and evening to you, Southam. So, we're looking forward to cracking into a good pod. I'm a bit groggy. I mean, looking at myself in the camera, and I look god awful. I need a bloody haircut.
Yeah. Tell the world what time you got in. Go on, Durbo. Tell the world.
2 a.m. last night. Yeah. Well, it's just not healthy, is it? Really? Like it's we just do two of the biggest one-day classics you do, and then you get in a car and you decide to drive to Andorra in the snow. You know what I mean? It's just like. Oh, anyway, it's all good. I'm not complaining.
Mate, you could always live in Belgium. Mate, what's wrong with living in Ghent?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's like 47% tax or something.
There it is. It's straight out. The benefits of Andorra. Oh, it's out there. We all try and play the card. It's good for training, the lifestyle. But there it is, straight out. We hear it right here from Durbo. It's all about the money.
You got me on a bad day. Couldn't hide it.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, look, I was gonna lean into the horrible flight and all those things, but it is a bit of a hard trip back from Belgium, Durbs, isn't it? After the classics, especially after the opening weekend, it's a rude awakening.
Yeah, it's like the reality of racing. Like, there's nothing really you can prepare beforehand. We flew up there on the Thursday and did a recon, and like we got in at like 3:00, went straight out to the Stones to do a bit of a check the pressure, and we rode for half an hour, and then this storm came in of like sleet, and it was just like insane. At one point we lost a rider, like we didn't know where he was, he had no phone. We got back to the bus, like anyone seen Blake? No.
I love it. We've got to get into this story in a minute, but I love how you just decided where's Blake when you got back to the bus, some hours later.
It literally was every man for themselves. It was that gnarly. Like
in the training ride. In the training ride.
I took the Talistrate and just kept going to stay warm. It's like
oh my gosh. Oh yeah. Well, guys, we've got to talk about our major partner for this podcast. The Race Communiqué is exclusively being brought to you by the Escape Collective. The Escape Collective was founded in March 2023, so they're coming up on their first year anniversary with the goal of being the best bike website on the internet. But also, the Escape Collective has a network of podcasts that include weekly news, tech, women's racing, performance, and industry stories. It's all ad-free and 100% funded by their members. If you want to take a deep dive into the cycling industry and understand how it got into the trouble it's currently in, there's a great 4-part series that has just been released last week that gives you those insights. You've got to just search for the Escape Collective on your favorite podcast services.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't get enough information from this podcast, then I guess you can always head over to that one and check it out. I might have to understand a bit more about my cycling as well and go and check it out myself.
Well, you can do a bit of research for this podcast, listening to other podcasts. I've done that before, not necessarily for this, but I just, there's that many people getting interviewed out there. If I'm going to interview them, I might just do a quick Google search and listen to someone else's podcast on them.
Fair.
Let's quickly talk about what is going on in this show. We've got the racing recap with me, Pello chat with Durbo, what's going on inside the Pro Peloton, and then talking some tactics with the race team director, Tom Southam. Hear some rumours, what's going on, the view from inside the team car. And then finally, we're going to jump into the community quiz. We've found a new name. Harry Downey has reached out and said, hey, this needs to be called the community quiz. What do you think of the new name?
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad one, Harry.
Not bad, Harry. Not bad.
Shout out to Harry. Let's get into the racing because I don't want to waste any more time. There has been so much racing. I can't keep up to date with it all. One, there's no GCN out here in Australia, so it's absolute hell trying to watch any races out here unless you want to sort of...
How many times do you think we're going to say that this year? There's no GCN.
Should we start a petition and get GCN Plus back?
Oh, man.
Even you're saying that.
The undershirt.
Why does it affect you so much, Durbo?
Well, because like Eurosport doesn't actually show all of it all together. Like before, it was like watch a bit of cross, bit of track, bit of road, bit of mountain. It was just like anything cycling, you know. And you had all those sweet documentaries that you did, you know. Watch me drink beers in Tasmania, you know what I mean? Something like that. Like that's all that stuff. Well, you can't watch that anymore.
The best one was I'm going to go right across the Alps, the Chiapucci stage, untrained. And it got to like, Chiapucci had finished the stage by now, and I've got 80 Ks to go, or whatever it was.
Yeah, demoralising that was. It was the most demoralising feeling. I was like, oh god, yeah. I
was hoping they did the GCN documentary on your Everesting with the magpies in the background. Like I'll send them actually the real video you sent me. This is so bad.
My idea, we're drifting off the topic, my idea Everesting was after 5,000 metres of climbing, I rode past a pub and I thought, great, I'll have a pint the last 1,000 metres climbing every 1,000 metres. So 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll just have 3 pints, 4 pints. I had that pint at 5,000 metres and I went, there's no way I'm stopping again. This is just such a bad idea. I got comfortable. I had booze in the system and I still had like 4,000 or 3,500 metres to climb. So, yeah. Silly. Anyway. Let's talk about the racing. There is so much racing, like I said. We can't go through it all. There's been racing in the Middle East. We've got Oman, UAE Tour, Spanish, Portuguese racing, Ruta del Sol, Algarve. You got Murcia, the Gran Camino. I think we're going to chat about that. There's stuff in the south of France with Ardèche, Tour of the Alps, Provence. But most importantly, we're in Belgium. The classics have started. The opening weekend. It's such a funny one, Durbo, isn't it? Because the opening weekend, it gets built up so much. It's this thing, and I don't know if everyone understands it out here in Australia or outside of that small world of Belgium, but it just feels like it's nothing else matters in Belgium than the opening weekend. It's like, it's happening, the opening weekend. It's almost bigger than the actual some classics, it feels like. And especially, I want to hear from you, especially the feeling in the racing. It's like such a rude awakening. Durbo, is it still the same? Is it still like this rude awakening? The bunch is just pushing for every inch and you're just like, what's wrong with me? Has everyone just gone up about 75 notches this year?
Yeah, no, it's still exactly the same. The look of fear in some neo-pro's face is priceless. You see them, I wouldn't mind being a classic rider. You know, they've told their parents that, they've told pro teams that, they've probably signed for that. And then you see their faces like, oh my God. And there's just, I had this scene, you know, like this is what I had in my head. The first in Umlum was like a Tarantino film. And you've got this like really relaxed track going on. And there's just chaos happening around you. You know, there's like guys crashing into gutters and there's guys, you know, I need a wheel. And there's like someone sliding off and you're just got this like, relaxed, calm, you know, oh, that guy, oh, he's going to pay for that. Oh, I wouldn't take that corner like that. Oh, bang, you know. So we were pissing ourselves after the race because I'm like, I had this song stuck in my head, Seabird by the Alessi brothers. And it was just
not familiar
so
with
bad, this song. And it just, anyway, it is as carnage as normal. Like, it's just like the weather, the cold, stress, what it means. Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
I want to talk about what it means because I think there's two sides to what it means, and I've got caught up in both of them. You go there, you have this feeling, you come out of it with like you either do really well in terms of not necessarily a result, but your feelings, your things you did in the race, you may have got a good result, and you come out of it with a bit of a false sort of feeling about like where you're at. I'm actually pretty good this year, and you sort of almost take the foot off the gas a bit. Yeah, cool, I'm in a good spot. Or vice versa, you go there, you're actually going pretty good, but for whatever reason, you puncture, you miss a split in the crosswind, whatever, and you think, I'm not going that good. And you put your foot heavy on the gas and you try and train the house down and do blah, blah, blah. So it's a weird one. And I'm almost and I was looking at a guy, Mads Pedersen, who came into the opening weekend with great form. It looked like I thought Mads was going to do really well there. He just came off 2 wins, the Tour de Garde and the Tour of Provence. Doesn't go to opening weekend, yet he's going to line up in the rest of the classics. Maybe that's a strategic move. Durbs, have you ever not done the opening weekend? And you explain sort of what I'm talking about. Do you have those same sort of feelings around that?
Yeah, like I'd agree with you. Like you can overanalyze opening weekend. I feel like I never really go in there thinking like a result is needed, or I just need to finish in the front group of both races, and you like if you can.
I love how easy you put that. Yeah, it's like if I could do that, it's like I could probably get a pretty good contract off that.
Yeah, so like if you can finish front group in both races, and I'm talking like the top 30 guys, like I was just a bit off. I got dropped on the Mer from the front 30, 15k to go. Like I was a bit upset about that, but also saying that it's just like I haven't done a race that hard since probably September last year, and you can't train it. So I was like, okay, that's not a bad sign, Then in Kuurne, then I was there in the group where we were sprinting for 4th. I was like, okay, perfect. That's the next day. I've already shown a bit of improvement. I try not to overanalyze opening weekend because it doesn't help anyone. Like, it could be filthy weather. It's still so far away, and you don't have Paris-Nice and Torino in the legs. And I feel like that just really puts the icing on the cake. My biggest thing now is coming out of opening weekend healthy. Healthy and ready to keep going and motivated to keep going. Like, you showed a little bit of glimpses like, yeah, actually, I survived these races. I can still do these races. I can still, deal with the fight, the pressure, the stress. And it's more like a mental thing. Like, am I up to the challenge? And I'm like, yep, I feel up to the challenge. Go to Paris-Nice and you polish up the form. And then when you come up to E3, you're ready to go. I sort of think that someone like Mads, who's won Kuurne before, probably nothing else to prove here. Other than if it's really filthy weather, there was so many crashes in Kuurne. It was insane. There was just guys on every corner. So, that's more of a risk for Trek. For example, Mads is now knocking on the door to be probably one of the favourites for like Flanders, one of the favourites for Roubaix. And for Trek, that's sort of like, it wouldn't really matter. They probably could wrap Mads up in cotton wool bud until then because he's that good, and they can just let him out there. Same with Van der Poel. He also didn't come.
My question then is, Durbo, and I totally agree with all the points you made there, not coming in, the first sort of shock of real racing. My question, maybe it's a question for Tom actually, is Jumbo-Visma. They come in, they not only win by dominance, dominance by winning, but they dominate the race from the outside. And you can debunk this, Durbo, but even a guy like Jorgensen, he was saying, I heard an interview from him, they were all up at Tenerife training, which we'd seen in the past by Team Sky. It didn't necessarily work for Team Sky, I didn't think. But Jumbo-Visma dominated the race. So they also haven't had a hell of a lot of racing, harsh racing, like you said, yet something they're doing either in training, preparing to make them all on this point. Even a guy like Jan Tratnik, who ended up winning opening weekend, and not to take anything away from him, he was super sharp. It's like, where do they go from here, and how did they come to that point? Southam, you've been doing training camps with teams and knowing that sort of perspective. How come, I guess, even your team weren't able to do something like that?
Firstly, for me, I've seen like the last couple of years, they've been ludicrous in opening weekend, and like the first stage of Paris-Nice and the first, like they're so good, but then they don't win Flanders, for example, and they're running out of steam by Roubaix with a classics team. To me, it seems like, it's a long, long way till the really big, that big week, right? With Flanders and Roubaix. And to me, it seems to be so good so early. I would almost be nervous if I was them, because you put yourself out there, you've put yourself, we're going to dominate with the best team, and then you've got a long, long way to go.
That's a really good point, Tom, because there is that question, and especially with Mads stepping out of it, I thought that was a really nice move to miss the crashes as well, to stay out of that idea that the form is definitely running out. One thing I also pulled out of the opening weekend was, I don't know, Durbo, what do you think about this, is that Niels Pollitt and Tim Wellens, maybe they were too happy to get second. These guys were sort of just like, Pollock almost looked like he rode Jan Traknik to the line. He did a big lead out for him and just sort of went, I can't win this, so I'm happy with second. And even in the interview, he was sort of like that. And then Wellens as well was like, oh, well, how can I beat Van Aert? It's great to get second here. We're sort of racing for second. I'm like, what is this mentality now? It's like, it's not even like, let's try and do anything or I'm pissed off or whatever. It's just like, oh, well, Jumbo-Visma, we're just sort of happy to get second here.
The classics, for example, are just like so insanely hard races. The podium now is actually like such a sought after thing. It's not like all about the win. Like Visma is almost like taken to a point. Like if I run second, like for example, Tom, if you guys run second in Flanders or we even run second in Flanders, like it's just, that would just be huge. It's like almost like second in the Grand Tour now. You know what I mean? Like it kind of feels that way. Like the win is like against Visma it doesn't seem like unattainable, but like it's a bit like, let's be realistic. Like we want to come in. Visma has like 6 of the strongest classic guys in the one team, and you're sort of like, if we can get on the podium, it's like a great thing. And like Niels Pollitt, new team, for example, signed with UAE as a classic guy, not necessarily a consistent podium guy in classics. Like he's always strong, but he's not like, Niels Pollitt, like he's like a Mads Pedersen. He's not, and so if he finds himself second in Umwelt, they're like, yeah, okay, we signed this guy. He's been on the podium at Umwelt. If he gets on the podium at Dwars, then it's all like Niels Pollitt was a good signing for the team. You know what I mean?
But what does it do for the team though, Tom? Like, yes, I understand the individual result is great, but for a team, you can't just sort of go, great, we got second in all these races. Let's go sponsors. We're really good. We're the second best team.
In the context of that team, you got to remember that what they're trying to do is be the best ranked team in the World Tour every year.
Right.
So if they're scoring points in races which they wouldn't traditionally get points in, right, without Pogačar there, without somebody else there, that's a win. Because what it's doing is it's keeping the gap close to Visma with the points total. So if you look at it, as like a whole picture, it's a massive win for them in terms of gaining those points and ticking that along in those races. And so for Pollitt and Wellens, it's great stuff, really.
I was confused why they did not sit on in Kuurne. Like I rewatched the highlights, and it was like they waited for so long. They both swapped through with Van Aert. Like sit on. Like Van Aert needs to win. There's a peloton of like 100 guys mowing down on them. That's a huge risk for Visma to take not to win the race. Van Aert just has to ride. Like I know Laporte won the kick, but like that's not a guarantee. So,
well, that was sort of where my question came from, and Tom sort of has answered it, I guess. These guys are sort of like, oh, well, maybe they're getting the team orders. You know what? If it goes back to a bunch, we're probably not going to get second in the race, or maybe there's a risk that we don't get any more points. Let's just have a look at the situation here and go, okay, we may win it on a lucky chance, but worst case scenario, we're going to get second, and the long game is we need to be the first World Tour team at the end of the year, but I guess, does that matter? That matters, does it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It matters. I mean, it's a way that you can actually quantify that you're the best team in the world because there's so many races to win and it's so confused, the whole calendar, that's one thing you can say, yep, we are on paper the best team in the world over all the races.
A couple other things I want to cover just before we move on from racing. There's just so much stuff I want to pick up from racing, but just before we leave the classics, Ivan Garcia Cortina, a guy who I think could do really well in the classics. He was 15th in Umlaut Het Niewsblad, 11th in Kuurne-Brussels-Kuurne. Durbo, I'm sure you know him from up in Andorra. He's a really nice guy. I got to know him when I was around there too. Spanish guy riding on Movistar. Could he do better on a different team? We've seen the transition from Matteo Jorgensen. That's the angle I'm going at. We've seen him come out of Movistar, and I know Ivan Garcia is Spanish and he fits in that environment well, but he loves the classics. It's not typical for a Spanish guy, and I'm wondering whether he could be a real contender if he moves teams.
Yeah, I think so, but depend. I think it's a bit of a depends because if he goes to Visma, Cortina's maybe fifth in line. for a result, and he might be doing a job prior to that. Like, for example, Latish Benoot, every single classic he would go to in any other team, he'd be outright leader. And, at Kuurne, for example, he did the job. He peeled into the climb and he was out of there, and Van Aert went on to win the race. And it's the same with Jorgensen. You might find that, yes, he might present himself opportunities, but there might be a lot of the time where it results back to Van Aert and Laporte, which are their two main guys, and their victories might not be as much. So I think, like Cortina, for example, Movistar have known as building a better classic squad each year. They've actually got some Spanish guys that want to be there. Obviously, they were third in Kuurne. They've actually got a Norwegian guy in there as well, and they've actually got some guys that actually want to be up there, and they're building a bit of a squad. So I don't know if Cortina would get the same sort of leadership if he went anywhere else, and maybe that 10th place, that 5th place here, 15th place there, maybe not be possible, because he'll be actually potentially doing a positioning role for a Van Aert or a Van der Poel.
My rebuttal to that is Jorgensen doing a job put him more in the race. I reckon if Jorgensen was a leader, he would have never ridden as well as he did in Umlaut. Because he was doing a job, it actually made him be on the front in the right positions. You know yourself, sometimes you're not thinking about the finish line. You're like, I've just got to get into the beard injuries first. That's my job to get up that climb. Next thing you know, because you drilled it into that climb, everyone gets dropped, and suddenly you're like, I'm actually in the front 8 here. If I'd been trying to get in the front 8 by sitting in 15th trying to follow, I wouldn't have made the split.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, for example, if you have an Affini in your team, he's going to put you in the first couple of sections in the first position, and then you go on to do your job from there. So you are in the bike race, and that's that first split, that first explosion, like you might say. If you can avoid that with a good team, then that definitely goes a long way. Yeah, so I do agree with that as well. But
lastly, coming out of the Classics, I want to sort of talk about, it's not really about the Classics, sort of out of the start of the year, Luke Lamparty, the young American guy coming from Trinity Racing, started with Quick Step, sort of one of the only sort of Quick Step hopefuls coming out of the Classics at the moment. But this guy, Southam, interesting. I'm sure you had your eye on him as he was coming through. Starts his season with a podium in Spain, then goes on to Oman, 2 podiums there, another podium in this Muscat Classic, and then Kuurne-Brussels-Kuurne finishes 7th. This is a 21-year-old who has hit the ground running. What are we thinking about him, Southam, and sort of the new hopes? They've also got Paul Manger coming out, also a young French guy, 19-year-old out of Trinity Racing as well, into Quickstep as well. These are the young guys coming through, the new crop.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see a guy come from the crit scene, particularly. He's been winning crits left, right and centre in the States. And to come in and perform at such a high level so quickly is it's sort of a different style of American rider. We've had quite a lot of the Grand Tour, GC type guys come through. So it's nice to see someone coming through with that sort of profile. And he's obviously, his bags of talent, man. Well, it's just one of those guys who doesn't seem to have need to any settling in period, straight into performing at races. Like Durbo was saying, most guys were terrified by those races, and he's ranked top 10. So
surprised you guys didn't pick him up.
Yeah, no, I was asleep for that one. It was they said, do I want him? I said, nah, he's never going to do anything.
Well, look, I don't want to waste the whole podcast on Racing Catch Up. We've got other stuff to get into. Durbo is up next with a little bit of Pello chat, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more racing with Southam at the end there.
all right, guys, we're here this week with Pello chat. I'm going to chat a little bit about race safety and weather protocol. I've just recently come back from Oman prior to opening weekend. We had a few stages there that were changed. So what I thought would be interesting is to delve into, just to let people out there know when a race changes. You might turn the TV on, for example, you'd plan to watch this stage, this climb, etc., and you're like, all of a sudden, like, well, how did they come to this, decision to cancel this stage or shorten this stage? And I've missed the end because I was meant to watch a 180k stage, but next minute you guys are racing 60k and all you bloody pros are soft. So, Oman the other day, we had a stage and a rainstorm came in and they had their annual yearly rainfall in one afternoon. And it was nuts. Like, I'm talking like torrential rain. Like, we were driving through just like puddles up to here. Guys were just like, I'll move up on the outside, hit a puddle, that's a medium strip. So they're just like handlebars. And just because you can't see, where the flooding was, it's like, I was just like, oh, yeah, okay, stay strictly to the middle of the road. Anyway, it was an uphill finish, so we got to the bottom and had the finish, Finfisher Black one. It was all okay. Anyway, that evening, what normally happens is the UCI commissaire, head commissaire. There's a rider representative, and I was voted to be the representative of the race for the riders, and Bernie Eisel was the director representative. Anyway, they called us down to the lobby in Oman, and the commissaire then is sitting there with the sponsor, which was almost like a sheikh of Oman. Like, he was one of the big guys in Oman that brought the riders to Oman. There was ASO, who were the head organizer of Tour of Oman, who also organised the Tour de France, people don't know. And then there was me and Bernie. So
wow,
we were all hashing it out.
Pretty intimidating.
A little bit. Just sort of like, I'm sitting there going, well, I mean, I know there's probably every person in this peloton wants to race, because a lot of the time Oman is that like prep race for the classics. And if they're going to make it a 60K road stage, then there's not going to be a lot of people happy about that. Look, to be honest, I just wanted to sprint because we had only Caleb, and that was all we had to do. So I was like, let's just make it flat. But they sort of shut me down there. Anyway, so what they did was the hard thing is getting the police on board, because at the moment that there was just flooding everywhere. So what they did was they decided to, like, it's crazy. They just like, we can close any roads you want. Like, that's pretty much what Oman said. We can close highways, anything you want. But like, what do you actually want? So it was like amazing. For within a couple of hours, we literally went like, that motorway is not flooded, we'll close that. That climb is safe to have a finish, we'll close that. And you guys will just do 70K flat up the climb, and that'll be done. Anyway, so we were just sort of thinking, like, how bad actually is it? And then you go online, you have a look, and like these towns are getting like washed away. So it was like proper flooding. And the UCI, ASO, and the commissaire all came up. You could imagine overnight they would have been out driving this stage. In the morning, it would have been getting all the banners ready. Like, there's a lot of logistics to all of a sudden go boom, and we still got a stage. So, and our safety was number one priority. So it's a massive amount of workload in the background, which I never really would have understood. Like, I would have been a rider in my bed going like, I need to do 170K because I'm training for opening weekend. Where, like, in the end of the day, like, most of the time you just don't get it. There's so many things going on in the background. And the police were like, well, why can't we just do the stage like that? We're like, well, the police are out saving lives. They're not they're not worried about a little bike race. You know what I mean? They just don't have police on tap.
I'm even surprised. I'm even surprised that the whole race got rerouted like that, because I could imagine, like in most other countries, they'd just be like, look, we just can't shut other roads down without getting permits months in advance, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know that for sure, but that's what I'm imagining.
Yeah, I think we were lucky because it was Oman, and they were they had the money, the resources to be able to do it. I don't think any other place they would be able to do it. But yeah, like that was pretty crazy. So what they're thinking now going forward is the CPA and UCI coming up. They already have a weather protocol at the moment, from my understanding. But what they're trying to do is get like some really strict guidelines, because it's gonna, like you said, Mitch, not every country is going to be able to be like Oman and just go, okay, we can just change a road here, do a road there. But if they can predict in the future there's going to be, in terms of what they deem a, severe weather issue, heat, cold, snow, flooding, etc., then they can try and reroute earlier, which means hopefully less races are cancelled, maybe more are edited, but they're not cancelled, because people don't want to see cancelled races, neither do riders do. And with the climate the way it's going, it's kind of like the new norm.
Did you see what happened down in Ruta del Sol? I was in preparation for this podcast. I completely missed that, and I'm looking at this race, Ruta del Sol. I'm like, That's weird. Yeah, time trial, and I'm trying to go back and look at it. It was a 1-day race. Was it only a time trial? All the other stages got cancelled. I know it's not the same vein, but still stages getting cancelled.
Yeah, ended up 4.9K for the whole race.
Yeah, I know.
There goes the classics form. But I mean, we had a similar situation twice in Gran Camino, where the time trial basically there was a storm off the coast, and they had to make a decision between the teams as what they were going to do. And it's one of those things where all the teams wanted the organizer to have the race on, because nobody wants the organizer to suffer, because they've taken money from towns for a start finish. They've put everything out, and they obviously struggled with they had a stage cancelled with the snow last year. So we ended up with a compromise where the stage didn't count for GC, and there was no TT bikes because it was just ridiculously dangerous on the coast there. But then later in the race, on the last stage, we had like heavy rainstorms, and they've actually got at Gran Camino, they've got portable weather stations in front, which pop up on you go to their website on your iPad, and you can see what the weather's going to be like 50 Ks down the road or something, which was quite good. And it was raining so heavily on the last stage that they cancelled the last climb, but they did it after 70K of the race already being covered, which isn't ideal, because you've made your race tactic, you've made your plan. And Nielsen was down the road in the brakes of the Visma car, but they spoke to Visma, the representative, and he came to our guys like, what do you think we shorten the stage? And we had one in the break, and I was like, yep, 100%, let's shorten it as short as you want.
Stop now.
That's just
finish line in 5K.
But it's definitely something we're going to face more and more, and you need to have, I think, a more robust policy in place, because otherwise you do get people abusing it for their own gain, because that's how cycling brains work, isn't it?
I think during the race is tricky. Like that's really, really difficult to be able to do. Amazing to actually be able to pull it off. But I think
it was only because it was a circuit.
A lot of recons and all. Yeah. Okay.
So you cut one circuit out. So that's the only reason it worked.
I think a really good point that you made there, Tom. It's going to continue to happen, and it is changing the world of cycling in terms of people getting a hell of a lot more soft out there. You guys are becoming softies these days, and I think the point is, and maybe it's a really good time to bring up Article of the Month, or if a new little segment we're going to tap into is we're going to pick out an article that we find interesting over at the Skate Collective. And one of them was, should substitutions be allowed in Grand Tours? And this comes back to exactly that, the abusing of the rules. And I just can't see it working, because even though I'm sort of pro substitutions, because I would have loved to got subbed out and subbed in as a guy getting tired in Grandies, sub me out, I'll come in for, stage 21, do the parade lap. I'll do stage, 1 to 6, sub me back in at 21. And again, on the cancellation of races, I loved it when races got cancelled, because it meant that I could just go back to the hotel and chill, miss a mountain stage, if it was too snowy at the top. Maybe that was just me at the end of my career, but the substitution in Grand Tour is a massive topic at the moment, which was, I think, really interesting. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but it was an interesting sort of discussion point. I guess I'd really love to hear your opinion on that.
I'm just going to go out there and say, not in 1 billion years could that ever work in cycling. Cycling is just such.
Thank you. I was like, it doesn't make any sense.
No, there would be, it's like the ways that we find to flick each other, like the stupid little things. Can you imagine if we could bring someone fresh in? It's ridiculous.
I sort of like the idea, if you fully embrace the idea and you use the substitution and you don't try and hide that it's not an advantage. So people really lean into the tactics of it. But if you try and make it a thing like, a guy's injured and, if he can go in the car and then he's actually not that injured, he can start the next day. We've got to get rid of all the grey stuff and just be like fully embrace substitutions like they do in other sports and use it like ice hockey. It's an advantage of trying to use your subs at the right time. And so you just don't ignore it's just a... Totally. You're like, got a good one coming off the edge. Docker, he's going to just bring in stage 21 for the parade, the champagne.
I was thinking about it, like, no climber would ever get to the Champs-Elysees. It'd be so sad. Like, no climber ever finished. Like, Jonas has done all his work, just gets traded out for a sprint squad. Like, Olive Colley comes in from the final stage to beat the sprint. Jonas has done all the work, and he just can't wear the yellow jersey on the Champs, so...
Yeah, I don't know. Like, Durs, what do you think? Like, what about the full embrace of it? And like, you can use a sub at the correct time, and just it's not ignored. It becomes a tactic of the sport.
I think Lefebvre put in that article on Scope Collective. It's like, not saying I agree with everything he says, but he sort of said that.
Careful, mate.
He sort of, but he said that
dangerous.
I think he had a good point that he mentioned that it's actually part of the resilience of our sport. It's like, when the chips are down, you might only have 3 guys and they come out, they win a stage, or, they do something positive because there's only 3 guys left in the race. And it's just like part of the reality. And then like the whole bunch, like might be like 100 riders that get to the Champs-Elysees, but like everyone's been through every single stage, and you're just like, that's part of cycling. I think you'd lose that with substitution. Guys like, that TT was hard yesterday, hey? You're like, yeah, but did you do stage 15?
I don't know, but like I agree with you if you can just sub out willy-nilly and whole teams and things like that. I totally agree with you. But one rider, only one, and it can only be done in the first week. Is it going to change it that much?
What time do they get?
They get the rider's time who pulled out.
Oh, no. What, 10 minutes because he broke his collarbone and finished the stage?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. That's bad luck. Oh, you mean like so he doesn't finish the stage, so the guy who doesn't finish the stage gets the last place rider's time.
I'm really glad you're not high up in rule making. Man.
Why? What's wrong with that?
I disagree.
I mean, like the worst case scenario is team time trial first day, everybody skins their asses, like happened to, at the Vuelta last year. It does happen, and it's just shit when it does, but that's it. That's part of the sport. I agree with everything Lefebvre says.
Hey, boys, I tell you what, someone's trying to get a job over there at Quickstep, both of you guys. Jesus.
All right, so that's it for me, and we'll pass it on to Tom.
Here we are, talking tactics, my segment here, boys. Now, I've just come back from Gran Camino, tough little 4-day race in Galicia, northern Spain. I guess neither of you two ever did it, did you?
Unfortunately, yeah, it wasn't around when I was still racing. Yeah. I would have loved to have hit that one up, honestly. I love Galicia. Great wine, good surf.
Yeah, well, I recommend that you don't do it. It's a seriously tough little race. It's, the 2.5 to 3,000 climbing meters every day. Heavy rain every day. And just absolute dominance from Jumbo-Visma. I mean, it was a bumper weekend for them anyway across the whole thing, but they brought their team with Jonas there for his first race. Last year, he won every stage of the race, and this year he won every stage of the race. And
did he, though? Didn't he win? Didn't he not win the time trial?
Time trial didn't count.
He's way back, though. So if he didn't get the full dominance.
I reckon if you'd wanted to. Actually, no, Tarling would have pushed him.
Yeah. I couldn't find his name in the list. I had to seriously go bottom up.
Yeah. Well, that was a strange day. I actually offered to ride the TT for one of the riders, like for Hugh Carthy. I was like, I'll put your kit on, and because it doesn't count. And then I read an article about a guy getting banned for a year today for having his mechanic race instead of one of the women in his squad to make up numbers. Yeah. So I was like, it's Danny Van der Hout, the guy from Jelly Belly, used to manage them. So anyway, bad tactic that. But I mean, the takeaway for me was whether Jonas really needed to win every single stage. And not just in terms of, it looks bad or he's winning too much, but in terms of the way that Visma was spending their energy. So if there's a break down the road that, like, in the days where it used to be like, okay, there's no one on GC, we're going to ride a conservative race because we've got the jersey. Or even if one of those guys gets the jersey, it's a mountaintop finish. It's a guy from Pro Conti team, we're going to take it back without a doubt. Every day, the breaks was just annihilated, basically. Even when we got to the day we had 7 minutes with Piccolo in there. Like, okay, now we've got a crack, now we've got a shot. Sure enough, sped up, Jonas leaves, does his thing, goes solo, rides away from everyone. And you're all just kind of scratching your heads going, don't you guys want a day off? Or, you know, I don't know. How does it look from your side, Mitch, seeing the same guy win and win and win?
Well, again, goes back to the classics thing that you were saying. I don't know, like the tour is his main goal. It's early. Like I saw this and I'm not a data guy, but I just had to do some numbers when I was doing this. Apparently up the climb, Licoria, if you pronounce that correctly, he did 11 minutes 25 at 6.9 watts per kilo. And I'm like, oh, what does that even mean? Is that even that good? And I was like, oh yeah, that's 418 watts at 60 kilo. I'm like, oh, what does that look like for me? I was like, that's 520 watts for me. I was like, oh, okay, maybe I could do that for a one-off, 12 minutes. I don't know. I couldn't. That's like my best 5-minute. So then the next day, up Decuso or whatever it is, Alto de Coso or whatever the climb was called, he does again 10 minutes at 418 watts. The last 4 minutes, he does at 8.3 watts per kilo. That's 500 watts average for 4.5 minutes for a 60-kilo guy. Do you know what I would have had to do to stay in his wheel? And I say 75. I'm actually probably about 80 these days. 625 watts for 4.5 minutes. This is unbelievable. Like, that's insane. And it's this time of year. So it looked total dominance, but from the TV, again, that data only put in perspective for me. From the TV, you're like, oh yeah, maybe the field's not that good, or, you know, it's a small race, so maybe he's riding away with ease. But now with that data, I'm like, no, he is so fit. He is so dominant. I don't know. Like, I just don't know where the Peloton, and I need to hear this now maybe from Durbo. I don't know where the Peloton is now, because in previous years it was a slow progression with these guys. These were, I use in inverted commas, training races with a direction to build form. But does that even exist anymore? Like does he take a break now and does he come back up, or is this just his starting building phase and he just takes it up from 8.3 watts per kilo to 9 to 10 watts per kilo?
I find that, like, it's not that different from when we was planning to win the tour. Like, he would come to Paris-Nice. They picked like 5 stage races that they were going to just like nail. You know what I mean? And then he would go away, go back to training camp, recover, do whatever. Like, they would come in, he would win Paris-Nice. You know, he would go and win, I don't know, Tour Romandy, and he would go and win the Dauphiné, and then he'd rock up the tour and win the tour. Like, and that was like a real Ineos model. Like, maybe Camino, it sounds like, yeah, a smaller race, but he did the exact same thing last year and he won the tour. Like, he just went and destroyed Camino. That's his like early season tester. He goes back, he'll rest. He'll probably go and destroy Basque like he did last year. Was it Basque or Catalonia? One or the other. Destroy that one, then rest again.
Destroy it. It has to be destroying. Can't we just ride? It has to be destroying.
It is. It is. When you see it.
He's destroyed. Like, he's actually destroying people. And then, like, he might come to Dauphiné and just destroy that and then go the tour. So it's like, yeah, I get it. Like, it's early, but he's not racing that much. He's probably ticking like 4 stage races before the tour that he's going to go and really do, like, come down to altitude, test his form, hit him hard, go and recover, go back again. I'm not saying it's easy, like, no one can do what he does, like, that's why he's the best. But yeah, I don't know. It's not, I also think one of it, like, everyone would love to see Jumbo fail because of the way they race. Does that make sense? Like, no one really wants to help Jumbo out. Like, the way they race the classics, like, you know, people are more than happy to see Quickstep win, Trek win, fucking Lotto win, you know, Sudal win, anyone win really other than Jumbo. And that doesn't really help. But in every race going into the season. I know they don't care, but like,
do you think it was like that when Quickstep were the dominance? Well, still potentially can be, but do you think people were happy with them when Quickstep didn't win? You know, now Jumbo's taken that role over.
Yeah,
I think it's always that. Yeah, it's always that team. It was the same with Sky, right? I mean,
now do people want Ineos to win suddenly?
I wouldn't go that far, but yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think one of the really interesting things for me is like you have a guy like Vingegaard or Pogacar or Remco, and you saw it with the races that Remco did earlier in the year. They've got this thing in their arsenal, basically, like when their team run out or when they get into difficulty, they just go. Like it's like, okay, well, they've ridden too hard, like because most of those teams ride too hard, harder than is necessary, I think, and they go, I'm just going to go, sod it, and it's really hard to deal with because it's not like once you get them isolated or on their own, they're just going to take off from you.
Does that come back to now with, I guess it's a tactic in a way, it was just confidence in the numbers. You saw, whether this is true or not, back in the Armstrong era, I remember seeing the doco, whatever it was, I can't remember now, so many docos about him and their team, but it was about when Ferrari started to understand, power to weight, watts per kilo, and they knew that Pantani couldn't sustain that watts per kilo. He just had these bursts. And then all of a sudden this new idea of racing came that, hey, we know what people can and can't do to a degree with power meters and things like that. Now everyone's got the confidence in their own, let's look at Vingegaard there, the confidence in their own ability. He knew what he could do out training. It's just repeat again. It's almost turning into an element of triathlon racing. You go and do your Ironman, you know what you can do out training, so you go and just repeat in the race regardless of what your teammates and your competitors are doing. You're like, cool, get out front, push my watts. I know that's going to be, no one else can do those watts.
Hit the lap button, It's just like, oh yeah, bam, lap, let's go. And people do that. It's a different type of racing, man.
Super exciting, isn't it? It's just awesome. It's just like...
I actually want to dive into a bit more exciting, one more like tactical thing that I picked up on, which was Ben O'Connor's win on Jebel Jais, which like I loved. I think the two for attack is, I don't know, the jury's out. Because I mean, you guys won't know about this, but we used to have a crit series in the UK called the Tour Series, which was like it was a teams competition. So it was one each crit. It was the best three from every team. So there are always these people coming up with these like scams to attack with 3 people or 2 people, and I've always sort of like with the British-based riders laughed at the kind of the 2 riders going at the same time or 3 riders going at the same time, But Rubio did it on the same climb last year. He went away with his teammate and then left him alone. Rubio tried it on Jebel Jais this year. It didn't work, and Ajay Duzan absolutely nailed it. And you actually asked him, didn't you, Durbo, whether it was planned or had a word with him after for me, and what did he say?
Yeah, so I spoke to Benno and I said, like, what was the plan there? And I think he sort of took a little idea from last year with the 2-up attack, but also Benno is not as punchy as, what was the other rider's name?
Palipan.
As a Palipan, he's like quite punchy, and Ben was asking him, well, they'd spoken about it beforehand. He said, if you're feeling good, I'd like you to, launch me, because Ben has like a really high sustained power, but he's not in terms of like sprinting. He can't just like punch out. And I think it's once you establish the gap, Ben can hold the gap, but to get that gap away from the riders, that shock effect, you really need someone that's like really punchy. So when he asked his Palipan if he was ready to go, he was like, yeah, I feel good. He's like, okay, go. And he went, and then apparently he didn't go hard enough, and Ben just like, no, sprint. And then the guy just like, oh, okay, I'll sprint. And you see, he goes once and sort of doesn't really get the gap, and then he just goes, look back, goes, oh, okay, you mean really go? And then he just goes. And Ben's like literally yo-yoing off the back of the wheel, like can barely hold the wheel. But because the shock was like so much, it just ripped them out of the peloton. And then Ben's just pretty much sustained the same effort all the way to the top to win the stage. It's pretty cool. Like you said, Tom, you don't see new tactics every now and then. It was actually pretty cool to see.
No, I don't think that's something that you can decide like 100% on the bus before the race. Like it's not like your DS stands up and says, right, we're going to do a 2-man attack at kilometer 165. That's something that has to come from the riders, I think. Like, let's do it. Let's commit to it. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever done it in your careers, but...
Well,
we did it once in Tour of Norway. I was in under 23, and I was actually just outside the jersey. I think it was like 30 seconds off the jersey in the final stage. And I got Michael Hepburn to come and launch me because I also couldn't get the gap. And he did the same thing. And we just went like, Rabobank under 23 we're riding. Heppy just comes from the bleachers with me on the wheel and just does a minute as hard as he can. And I can barely hold the wheel. It's like, on and off. and he pulls out, and then I just keep going. Anyway, I was like in the virtual lead, going to win the stage. It was probably like inside 5K to go. Double punctured, and they didn't have a car behind me. So like it was one of those
under 23 races.
Just really bad, sad stories. But anyway, yeah, it did work. So, but I think it really works when you've got someone that like is like a diesel, or like someone who can hold the wheel, but someone who's got this like get out of jail free 1 minute, because you need to really establish the gap, like bang,
the right combo.
If you're someone who can't do that, it doesn't work.
Yeah, well, we obviously see the two upper Italian attack and Durbo and Heyman going up the road all day together, that sort of style. But we we don't often see, like you said, I call it just the elongated lead out, essentially. Yeah, what did you call an attack? It's so close to the line. It's essentially just a well-timed lead out, in my opinion.
It's not a lead out.
You're inside the last 5K. It's a lead out.
So they did a lead out.
Like
nobody else did a lead out
for Kittle.
Well, they couldn't hang on to the wheel.
Oh, come on.
You can't claim that as an attack. I don't think that's a plan. That's just essentially like me just doing a lead out for Matthews back in the day. Like, how come I wasn't doing the 2-man attack? I've done heaps of 2-man attacks. Heaps.
So you're calling a full lead. You're calling a full lead out. Like, so a 6-man lead out is a 6-man attack. If you don't lose the
totally. There's been so many teams attacks you've missed. Did you see that great? Did you see the great team attack by Astana over in Colombia? Great.
Yeah. Well, on that note, boys, I'm going to wrap up my segment after Mitch just shit canned my my choices. So that's me.
All right, here we go. The community quiz. And yes, you know what? Durbo's put his hand up this week, and I get a chance to try and stitch Southam up, which should be pretty interesting from my side. Durbs?
The community quiz, thank you, Harry, for the name. But what I've decided is that we've got something to play for. We're going to call it a shout card. And so whenever we see each other, you have to shout someone their drink of their choice. So if I see you at a race, Southam, there'll be a beer like coming over to your table stealthily. If I'm won the last week before, you have to, give me a brew or something, Mitch, when you come to Europe, so whenever we see it's on, you've got the shout card. So you don't want the shout card because that means you've lost the quiz.
So does the shout card only apply like who's got it week in, week out? So if I don't see you between, and I lose this week, if I don't see Southern between next week, the shout card's off my shoulders, or it just builds up? I've got like 5 shout cards to give to Southern.
No. It's just one card, and it doesn't actually matter. So, for example, you could encourage people to actually do the quiz because you're sort of like off the shout card situation. Right. So at the moment, like if you lose, Mitch, you get the shout card.
Right. You just pass it on.
You see us, you have to shout me and him. You just pass it on. So that's how we're going to play this year.
I like it.
Quiz. Okay. All right. This is a general quiz knowledge. I actually just did like a pub quiz situation, and then I did a few little quizzes at the back end. All right. Now, if you don't get it, I think what we should do is first person come out and say it. If not, I'll just go to the next question. You know what I mean? It's like rapid fire. Don't worry if you don't get it. I'll just say the answer if you don't get it within a couple of seconds. The suspense for everyone back home.
Oh, yeah.
Purely for our own benefit. Okay, here we go. General knowledge. What's the smallest country in the world?
Liechtenstein.
No. Religious.
Oh, Vatican City.
Oh,
1 point.
Well done, Southam.
What's the slang name local New Yorkers call their city?
The Big Apple.
Apparently Gotham City.
Oh, that's all right. Half a point for me.
Song, man. Come on.
Half a point. No, half a point. Longest river in the world?
Tom.
There we go. Best-selling book of the 21st century?
Harry Potter.
Oh, Tom, you're
smoking. My God.
Yes, bring Tom to the pub quiz. Oh, I don't even know if I'll say this because Tom's just going to get another point. Famous Bristol artist.
Oh, Banksy. Yes.
Banksy.
Oh, nice.
Mitch. Got rolled at home. Unbelievable.
All right, this one got to be real quick. Listen to the question because you're both going to get it. City the Beatles are from?
Liverpool.
London.
Oh, Tom. Nice one.
No.
What was Nike originally called?
Adidas.
No. I always want to give you a point.
Something.
No. Okay, it's called Blue Ribbon Sports.
Oh.
Okay. Now, this is a multiple choice, this one. Oldest brewery in the world. There's 3 choices. There's Wien in Southam Abbey, Germany. I can't actually pronounce it. You might have heard of it. Anyway. Faversham Brewery, Shepherd Neame, or the Ansa Bush, or AB InBev, which is in Belgium.
I'm going to go with the German brewery.
I would do the same, but I'll go for a different one just for the hell of it. I'll go for the Belgian one.
Okay. Yeah, Mitch is right.
Oh, I knew that one.
So we're 2-4 at this current point.
2.5. Big apple.
All right. Simon Yates, his middle name.
James.
Come on.
Isn't it James?
No idea.
Would you say?
It's James, I thought.
Well, because it's the reason I say it because it's always on the results sheet. It's like next to his name. It's like those random ones they just add the middle name. You know that one?
Is it not James?
It's not James. Okay. I thought because like every time you look down it just says like Simon.
Oh wait,
Philip Yates.
I'm still thinking.
No, you just all right.
Wait a sec. Still thinking.
Wait, I got another one. No, Matt Goss's middle name.
Harley. Yes.
Oh, there we go. All right, boys. You've brought it back up. It's 3-4. Okay. Actually, there's last question. And so if you get it, it's draw. All right. How many races in the 2024 World Tour? Now, let me establish the question. It's not like a stage race is one race.
So World Tour races.
World Tour races in general, but like a stage like Paris is one race. Yeah. Okay.
26.
Yeah. Wait. I have 3 multiple.
Oh.
So 35, 25, 50.
35. 35 for me.
Tom?
Southam said 50.
Oh, it's a draw.
Yes!
Mitch got to 30.
Plus the Big Apple.
No, that's not. We're 4 apiece. Anyway. So no one shouts anyone? Is that like boring now? I didn't know we never had a draw before. We don't know how to deal with this. Penalty shootout?
You should have had a backup question. Let's just leave. We can do the backup next week.
Well, there you go, boys. That's my quiz. Little pub quiz.
Nice
more
one,
rapid.
Durbo.
No, that's great.
More general.
Very good, Devs. Guys, could have chatted with you all morning. I know you guys have got to go to bed, so we'll let you go. Thanks, guys. See you next time.
See you, fellas. See you around. Nice one.
See you guys. Bye.
That iconic music in this episode was composed by none other than the legend Pete Shelley. Cheers, mate.